Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw this super quick and easy owl using pit pastels. So let's get started. So these are the art supplies I'm going to use for this drawing, and you can pause the video right here to note them down. I'm using this A3 size paper from my ordinary black paper pad, and the drawing portion area is 11 x 14 inches. I'm using Faber-Castell pit pastel pencils for this drawing, but during the drawing process I noticed that they are not performing as expected due to the smoothness of this paper, since they have a chalky texture, and when I attempted to layer them, they began to scrape off previous layers instead of adding new ones. Therefore, for better and more vibrant results, I would suggest you to use Faber-Castell Polychromos or Faber-Castell Classic color pencils. I've compared the shades of pastel pencils and polychromos and created a list for your convenience. You can pause the video right here to note them down. I drew the outline using grid method, and you can find the detailed step-by-step process from making the grid to outlining on my Patreon profile. Link is in the description. Okay, so as the outline is done, let's move on to the shading and blending process. As we can see that there are different shades and tones of feather in the reference image. So I'm going to layer different shades accordingly. So first of all, I'm adding these lines for a base layer in the left ear using 187 first, and then adding these lighter feathers using white pastel. Keep in mind that I'm going to use all the colors from 1122 family for this drawing. Use soft and light strokes to create a smooth and even base layer. I'm leaving the areas where I want darker feathers, as it will be difficult to layer pastel. Now by using a small size blending stump, I'm blending this layer carefully in back and forth motion to avoid any extra spill, as the ear has bright orangish brown feathers. So I'm layering 187 again in the required areas, and then adding the darker layer of feathers using a black pastel pencil. This layer is very important as it will define the shape of the feathers and bring the previous layers together. After blending, the texture of the white strokes faded away. So I'm adding another layer over the previous one and in the rest of the ear using a white pastel. I'm adding these strokes by flicking the pencil in one go. This will create even strokes with sharp ends that are blended with the background, just like this. Okay, so now I'm blending the ends of these few strokes I've just added using a very light hand to avoid over blending. Feather texture can be intricate, so work on one section at a time to avoid smudges or spills. Okay, now moving on to the feathers around the eye, and first of all I'm adding white strokes of variable length on the left side. Then by using 187, I'm filling this semi-circular area thoroughly to create a base layer for feathers. This layer will also add tint to the upper layers of the feathers. And when you're done with it, start blending this layer using a blending stump thoroughly to achieve a smooth base layer. The feather texture on this portion is different as compared to the rest of the body. So I'm adding these straight strokes and changing the angle along the curvature to fill the area completely. And then to make this layer a little bit 3D, I'm adding these small strokes near the eye to create the illusion of depth. Now I'm using 187 and adding these vertical lines and strokes, mainly focusing on the outer side of this semi-circular area. And to intensify the orange shade, I'm using 113 and adding strokes in between and also over the previous ones to create different tones and shades. I'm going back and forth with my tools to achieve desired results, as pastels are chalky, so they easily get faded when layered. I'm also filling the eyelid portion using the same white pastel. Moving on to the eye, and first of all I'm adding a base layer in the iris thoroughly using a 113. Leaving this space for the pupil as well. Now I'm using a yellow 106 and shading the lower portion of the iris, and this will create a perfect gradient without any harsh line or edges. And to make the iris shiny and 3D, I'm adding this thin line along the inner side of the outline of the iris. Okay, so to fine tune and to make the outline even, I'm using a black pastel and redefining the outline and also filling the pupil later on. You can always go back and forth with your tools to adjust the shades and contrast until you are fully satisfied with the results. And by the way, you can get access to our premium content and support this channel through Patreon. You can sign up through different membership levels and get access to all the outline and grid reference, etc. We have an ever-growing library of hundreds of exclusive and real-time tutorials, and you will also get access to 4 new tutorials every month. You can also post your artworks in our active community of patrons and participate in our weekly critique sessions where I give my honest and positive critiques on your artworks, so you can improve your skills and get better with your drawing. Visit the link in description and become a premium member today. Okay, now let's move on to the forehead, and firstly I'm adding a base layer as I did before using 187, and then I'm using a darker shade of 182 as I move towards the forehead. Notice that I'm leaving some spaces in between for the darker texture. This will prevent unnecessary layering. Now it's time to add darker texture over the previous ones, and I'm using a black pastel for this purpose. I'm adding the mixture of smaller and bigger curved strokes to mimic the natural flow and shape of the feather. Okay, so the lighter feather texture on the forehead is a little bit different as compared to the rest of the texture. So the strokes are wider from one end and are thinner from the other, so I'm adding them accordingly. I'm also adding the strokes with higher pressure and flicking my pencil with gradually decreasing the pressure. This technique will create this required texture, just like this. Okay, now moving on to the right side, and there is a shadow that causes part of the body to blend with the background. So I'll be using black and white pastel more on this side. I'm repeating the similar process of adding a base layer first, followed by a darker and a lighter feather strokes. Okay, so the shading and highlighting process for the right iris is similar to the left side. The only difference is in the shadow, so I'm adding it accordingly. Moving on to the surrounding portions, and firstly I'm adding darker feather strokes using a black pastel, and then adding lighter strokes with the variable length and direction to mimic the natural flow of the feather. To add the tint of brown, I'm using 182 and adding thin strokes with lighter pressure on the right side of the nose. And for the left side, the endings of the white feather are brownish. So to mimic that, I'm adding these strokes focusing on the ends of the white ones. Okay, now moving on to the beak, and first of all I'm darkening it using a black pastel and filling the area thoroughly. I'm also adding some strokes around it to add depth to the feathers. While adding these strokes, some of the previous ones got faded, so I'm adding them again using a white pastel. I'm going back and forth with my tools to achieve these desired results. Okay, so now moving on to the body, and I'm adding a base layer using white pastel under the beak area very carefully. Before moving further, I'm adding these thin yet straight lines around the eye portion to add depth and detail to the individual feather strokes. Okay, so coming back to the body, and I'm using 182 and adding random strokes of variable length and direction for a base layer. Now I'm adding a darker texture using a black pastel and adding a mixture of smaller and bigger curved strokes. I'm changing the direction of these strokes depending upon the area I'm working on. Add longer strokes for the lower portion and it will blend the body with the background very beautifully. Now it's time to add the final layer of lighter feathers using a white pastel. And with this last step, we are done with this super quick and easy owl drawing. It takes so much time and efforts to create this tutorial, so please leave a like if you enjoyed this one. It helps me a lot as an artist. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.